Something about this has shifted, and the first card is already telling us why. This is the Ace of Cups, and symbolically, this card is about emotional overflow, a feeling that becomes too strong to keep contained. So if you've been dreaming about the same public figure again and again, or waking up with that strange sense that the dream felt more vivid than normal, the real question isn't, was that a prediction? The more interesting question is, what part of you is finally ready to be seen? Because that's what this card is pulling me toward. The Ace of Cups is not proof that a celebrity is secretly in love with you. Think of it as a mirror. It represents emotion becoming conscious. Something that used to live quietly in your imagination is starting to affect how you show up in the real world. And that matters, because there's a very strong theme here around visibility. You may have started posting more, showing your face more, sharing your art, your voice, your writing, your music, your opinions. Maybe you changed your profile picture recently. Maybe you uploaded something and almost deleted it because suddenly you felt too exposed. But you left it up, and that tiny decision is more important than it looks. Because if this reading resonates, the "they found you" message may be less about some impossible psychic certainty and more about the fact that you've finally become discoverable. Your name, your face, your work, your presence, they exist somewhere another person could actually encounter. Wait, because this is where the Ace of Cups gets really interesting. There is a difference between chasing recognition and allowing yourself to be recognizable. Those are not the same thing. The old version of you may have wanted to be noticed while simultaneously hiding the most authentic parts of yourself. You wanted confirmation, but you were terrified of attention. You wanted someone extraordinary to see you, but you weren't fully comfortable seeing your own value yet. And now? Something is opening. For some of you, this celebrity may already have crossed your content, your comment, your username, or something connected to you online. That does not mean they consciously know your story. It does not mean there is a secret relationship happening behind the scenes. But the possibility of recognition exists now in a way it didn't before. And card number 2 is where we find out what kind of recognition this actually is. And the second card is the King of Wands. Okay, this changes the feeling of the recognition quite a bit, because the King of Wands is not really about somebody noticing you because you were trying desperately to get their attention. Symbolically, this is presence, confidence, creative identity, the kind of energy that makes someone noticeable because there is something very defined about them. You know who they are, or at least you want to know. And that distinction matters here. Because if someone notable has crossed your content, your name, your face, or something you created, the thing that catches their attention may not be what you assume. It may not be that you looked perfect. It may not be that you said exactly the right thing. It may simply be that something about you felt specific. Your voice, your humour, your style. The way you expressed an opinion without immediately apologising for having one. The way you created something that actually looked like you, instead of something designed to please everybody. That is very King of Wands. This card represents someone who occupies their own space, and when I put that beside the Ace of Cups, there's a really interesting progression happening. First, you became emotionally willing to show yourself. Now, you're becoming recognizable as yourself. Those are two completely different stages. You can be visible without being memorable. Millions of people are visible online every day. But when somebody begins developing a distinct presence, there's suddenly something another person can associate with them. A certain energy, a point of view, a way of showing up, and maybe that is the kind of recognition we're talking about. Not necessarily. This celebrity saw you and instantly decided something huge. That's too much certainty. It could be much quieter than that. Maybe someone sees something you posted and pauses. Maybe your face feels familiar when they encounter it again. Maybe something you said sticks with them. Maybe your work reaches a space you don't even know it reached. And then later, recognition happens. Wait, because the King of Wands adds another layer. This card can also symbolize someone who is already accustomed to attention, someone charismatic, established, someone whose presence naturally draws eyes. which is interesting when the entire reading started with a public figure appearing repeatedly in your dreams. Because perhaps what fascinates you about this person is not only who they are, it's what they represent. Being seen without shrinking, having influence without asking permission, walking into a room and assuming you belong there, and maybe something in you has started learning that language. Not copying them, becoming more fully yourself. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question, why would this energy be showing up now? Why would you become noticeable now instead of 6 months ago? Why not 2 years ago, when you may have wanted this even more? Because something about the way you carry yourself has changed. And the next card shows exactly what, and this is the Page of Pentacles. That actually explains the timing in a very different way. Because this card is not about suddenly becoming famous, it's not even really about attention by itself. Symbolically, the Page of Pentacles is about beginning to take something seriously that you may have previously treated like a possibility, a skill, a project, your appearance, your work, the way you present yourself. Something moved from, maybe one day, into, let me actually see what happens if I give this my attention. And I think that's the change, because when we had the King of Wands we were talking about presence, that feeling that there is suddenly something more defined about you. But the Page of Pentacles tells me that definition didn't appear out of nowhere. You've been building it. Maybe quietly. Maybe without even realizing that other people could see the difference. You may have gotten more consistent about something, you started practicing more, posting more regularly, improving the quality of what you make, paying attention to details you used to ignore, or maybe you simply stopped treating your own interests like they were embarrassing. That matters, because there's a point where somebody stops asking, will people like this? Before every decision and starts asking, is this actually mine? And strangely enough, that is often when people become more noticeable, not because they're trying harder to be noticed, because they're becoming clearer. Maybe an old post gets shared again, maybe a clip suddenly reaches people outside your normal audience, maybe somebody you know sends your work to somebody else. Maybe an algorithm puts your face or your voice in front of a person who would never have encountered you otherwise. Those things happen every day. They are possibilities, not proof that any specific celebrity has consciously searched for you. But here's what's interesting. The Page of Pentacles is holding something tangible, and symbolically, that makes me think this shift is no longer happening only inside your imagination. There is something in the real world now that represents you, something somebody can actually find, and maybe 2 years ago that wasn't true. Maybe 6 months ago you were still editing yourself so heavily that even when people saw you, they weren't really seeing you. Now, there's more of you in what you make. And I keep coming back to these dreams because maybe the celebrity isn't only representing a person you want attention from. Maybe they represent the amount of attention you're becoming capable of receiving without disappearing. That's a very different idea, because wanting recognition is easy when it stays imaginary. Actually, becoming visible enough to receive it, that changes you. And the next card complicates this even more, because I'm starting to think these dreams may not actually be about this celebrity, in the way you think they are. And this is the Seven of Cups, reversed. Okay. That actually makes the dream piece much clearer, because upright, the Seven of Cups is associated with possibilities, projections, fantasies, and all the different stories the mind can build around something it deeply wants. Reversed, the fog starts separating from what is real, and I don't mean that in a disappointing way. I mean, you may be starting to understand why this particular person keeps appearing in your mind, because think about it. What does this celebrity represent to you specifically? Not what everybody else thinks about them. You. Is it freedom, confidence, beauty, talent, money, being desired, the ability to reinvent yourself and somehow survive being watched while you do it? Maybe they say things you've always been afraid to say. Maybe they built a career around something you secretly wish you had permission to take seriously. That distinction matters. Because sometimes we become fascinated with a person when they are carrying qualities we haven't fully allowed ourselves to claim yet, and the Seven of Cups reversed can symbolize recognizing the projection. You start realizing, wait, maybe I don't only want this person, maybe you want what being close to them represents. A different life, a different version of yourself, a version that doesn't feel small around success. And suddenly, those recurring dreams make more psychological sense. Maybe your mind is not predicting a relationship, maybe it is rehearsing proximity. What would it feel like to stand beside someone you once placed completely above yourself? What would happen if they spoke to you normally, if you weren't trying to impress them? If you were sitting somewhere ordinary together, at a table, backstage in a car, walking through some completely normal place, and the dream didn't feel extraordinary at all, pay attention to that. Because if the dreams have changed recently, that may be important. Maybe you used to feel nervous around this person in the dream. Now you don't. Maybe you used to chase them through crowds. Now they're simply there. Maybe you used to wake up thinking, I can't believe they notice me. And now, inside the dream, being noticed almost feels normal. That doesn't prove they're communicating with you. But it may say something very real about your relationship with yourself. The King of Wands showed a stronger presence. The Page of Pentacles showed you actually building something tangible around that identity. And now the Seven of Cups reversed asks you to separate the person from the meaning you've attached to them. Because idolizing somebody creates distance. Recognizing the qualities you share or want to develop starts closing it. But wait, there is one detail in these dreams that could change this entire reading. When the two of you meet in the dream, who approaches whom? And this next card is the Fool, which is interesting because the Fool changes the question from who is chasing whom to something even more important. Who is willing to move? Because symbolically, the Fool is about stepping into unfamiliar territory without having every outcome guaranteed first. So think about the pattern in your dreams. If this person keeps approaching you, that may reflect something changing in your ability to receive attention. You're not running after it. You're not trying to prove that you deserve it. It comes toward you, and you stay where you are. That sounds small. It isn't. Because for someone who has spent years imagining recognition while simultaneously feeling intimidated by it, simply remaining present when attention arrives can represent a huge internal shift. But maybe your dreams look different. Maybe you're always trying to reach this person. You see them across a room. You're following them somewhere. You're trying to get close enough to speak, but something keeps interrupting you. That can symbolize something very different. Maybe part of you is still placing whatever they represent outside yourself. Success is over there, confidence is over there, the interesting life is over there, and you're here, trying to reach it. But wait, there's a third possibility. Maybe nobody approaches anybody. Maybe you're already together. You're in the same room, the same car, the same conversation. Maybe other people are around, and nobody is acting like your presence there is unusual. That one stands out to me. Because psychologically, the distance may be collapsing, not necessarily between you and one literal celebrity. Between you and the kind of world you once assumed you could only observe from the outside. The Fool is very much about crossing that line, and in real life that can happen in surprisingly ordinary ways. You meet somebody through work. You accept an invitation you normally would have talked yourself out of. Your creative project reaches a different audience. Someone introduces you to someone else. A conversation leads somewhere you couldn't have planned. None of that guarantees you're about to meet this specific person. But it changes the structure of what is possible. Because the question stops being, how do I somehow get into their world? And becomes, what happens if I build a life that naturally intersects with worlds like that? That is completely different. The Fool doesn't stand at the edge waiting for someone important to come rescue them. They move, they participate, they let life become larger than the version they already understand. And I think something outside these dreams may already be reflecting that. A new connection, a strange invitation, an unexpected person paying attention to your work, something that seems unrelated right now. Because the next card is pointing toward a bridge. And I don't think that bridge is who you expect. And this is the Magician reversed, which is interesting because this card makes the bridge much less obvious than you would expect. The Magician upright is usually associated with having tools, connections, skills, and the ability to bring different pieces together. Reversed? You may not realise what you already have access to. That's the part I want you to notice, because when people imagine getting anywhere near the world of someone famous, they usually picture some enormous gap. You're here, they're there, and somewhere between the two is this impossible wall of managers, industries, invitations, private rooms, and people you would supposedly have to know. But real social networks rarely work that neatly. Sometimes the distance between two completely different worlds is one person, or one project, one repost, one conversation you didn't think mattered. Maybe somebody who follows you works with photographers. Maybe somebody you went to school with knows a musician who knows a producer. Maybe a person who quietly watches your content works in an industry adjacent to the one you're fascinated by. Maybe something you made gets sent into a group chat you will never know exists, and no one leaves a comment. No one tells you, nothing visibly happens. That doesn't mean any specific celebrity has received your work, but it does mean your visible metrics are not a complete map of where something can travel. Wait, because the Magician, reversed, also points to underestimating ordinary resources. You may be looking for some glamorous connection, while ignoring the person who has been sitting right beside the doorway, the friend who keeps telling you to submit something, the co-worker who knows somebody, the small creator who wants to collaborate, the person who invited you somewhere and you almost said no because it didn't seem important enough. That could be the bridge, not because they secretly hold the key to one celebrity, but because participation creates networks, and networks create proximity. That's what the Fool was already showing us. You move first, then the landscape changes, and I think some of you have been so focused on the question, has this person noticed me, that you may be missing something bigger. Your work may be entering spaces where people like them exist. People with audiences, people with access, people whose lives overlap with industries you used to experience only from the outside. That is a much more realistic kind of closeness. And strangely, it may begin with someone you currently consider completely ordinary. But there's another problem here. Because even if your work does travel farther, what do you think would actually make someone remember you? Your appearance? Your achievements? Trying to seem impressive? Because the next card suggests it may be almost the opposite. And this is the Two of Pentacles, which is interesting because this card is almost the opposite of trying to look perfectly put together. Symbolically, the Two of Pentacles is about movement, adaptability, holding different parts of yourself at the same time without forcing everything into one polished image, and I think that may be exactly what makes you memorable. Not perfection, range. Maybe you're serious about something and incredibly funny 5 minutes later. Maybe you have a very specific aesthetic, but your personality doesn't match what people expect from it. Maybe you're intelligent without needing to sound impressive. Maybe you can be confident and awkward, creative and practical, private in some ways and completely expressive in others. Those contradictions make somebody feel real. And real is harder to replace, because think about how much content people see every day. Perfect photographs, perfect captions, perfect branding, people trying very carefully to communicate, this is who I am. But sometimes the person you remember is the one who wasn't trying quite so hard to control your impression of them. They said something strange. They laughed at the wrong moment. They had a perspective you hadn't heard before. Something about them moved, and you remembered it. Wait, that connects all the way back to the beginning. You almost deleted the post, but you left it up. Maybe it wasn't the most polished thing you've ever made. Maybe you noticed something imperfect about it immediately, but there was also something alive in it, something specific to you. And if your work is beginning to move through wider networks, like the Magician reversed suggested, that specificity matters more than trying to become some imaginary version of a person a celebrity would find impressive. Because you don't actually know what would impress them. And neither do these cards. But psychologically, People who encounter enormous amounts of attention are still people. They notice difference, they notice personality, they notice when something feels overly calculated, and they notice when somebody seems comfortable enough to be particular. The Two of Pentacles tells me you may have spent years editing out parts of yourself because they didn't seem consistent enough. Too weird, too intense, too playful, too opinionated, too much of one thing, and then suddenly something completely different. But what if that is the point? What if the thing you keep trying to smooth out is the thing that makes someone remember you? And this is where visibility gets uncomfortable. Because once people actually start responding, you may suddenly want to control everything again. Change the caption, hide the older posts, make yourself safer, more neutral, more acceptable, maybe even disappear for a while. Because being discoverable is one challenge, surviving the feeling of actually being seen is another, and the next card shows the exact fear that could make you sabotage that moment. And this is the Ten of Cups, which is probably not the card you would expect after I just said we were looking at fear, because the Ten of Cups looks happy, complete, everything seems to have worked out. And that may actually be the problem. Symbolically, this card can represent the picture in your mind of how everything is supposed to feel once you finally get what you want. The perfect recognition, the perfect interaction, the perfect response. Maybe in the fantasies, this celebrity notices you and immediately understands you. There's no awkwardness, no uncertainty, no wondering what they thought afterward. No possibility that you said something weird or that the moment didn't unfold exactly the way you imagined. Because fantasy gives you control, reality doesn't, and I think that's where the fear starts showing up. You may genuinely want more people to discover you, but then something you post gets more attention than usual, and suddenly you're reading your own caption 10 times. You're wondering if you sounded stupid. You're looking at older posts thinking, should I delete that? Someone leaves one strange comment, and somehow that comment becomes louder than all the positive ones. Or nobody responds in the way you expected, and your mind immediately turns silence into rejection. Wait, that is important, because the Ten of Cups can become an impossible standard when you treat the ideal outcome as the only safe outcome. And if you knew the exact person you've been dreaming about could see your page tomorrow, would you still post the same thing? Would you still wear what you actually like? Would you still make the joke? Share the opinion? Upload the song? Show the artwork? Or would you immediately begin creating for their imagined approval? Because if you change everything the second you believe someone important might be watching, you haven't really become more visible. You've just built a new version of yourself to hide behind, and maybe that is the deeper meaning of they've already found you. Not that we can prove one specific celebrity has discovered you, but you've crossed from hidden into findable. There is enough of you in the world now for people to form impressions, and your nervous system may still be catching up to that. That's uncomfortable because real visibility means giving up control over the ending. Somebody may love what you do, somebody may misunderstand it, somebody important may notice, they may not, and you still have to remain yourself. Because the next card suggests something even bigger. Part of the fantasy has to end, not the possibility, the fantasy. And until that happens, the real possibility may never feel safe enough to actually live. And this is the Empress reversed. That makes the idea of letting the fantasy go even more specific. Because the Empress upright is often associated with worth, abundance, attraction, creativity, and being able to receive without constantly proving that you deserve to. Reversed, that value can become something you keep trying to get reflected back to you from somewhere else. And I think that's what has to change, because maybe, underneath all of these dreams, there has been a quieter hope that if this particular person noticed you, chose you, admired you, or wanted to know you, then something would finally be settled. You would know you were attractive enough, interesting enough, talented enough, special enough. Like their attention would somehow answer a question you've been asking about yourself for years. Wait, because that is very different from simply wanting to meet somebody you admire. There's nothing wrong with curiosity. There's nothing wrong with attraction. There's nothing wrong with imagining what it would be like if your worlds actually crossed. But when their recognition becomes evidence of your worth, they stop being a person, they become a verdict, and nobody should have that much authority over the way you see yourself. That's what the Empress reversed is pulling apart here. The fantasy that somebody extraordinary has to choose you before you're allowed to experience yourself as extraordinary. Because look at what has already happened throughout this reading. You became more visible. You stopped editing every interesting part of yourself out. You started putting something real into the world. You began entering spaces and networks that once seemed far away. And then the fear appeared. What happens if somebody actually sees me? The answer cannot be, I immediately reshape myself into whatever I think they would want. Because then you disappear again, just in a more sophisticated way, and maybe that is what has to end. Not the dream, not even the possibility that this celebrity, or another person from that world, could someday encounter you. They might. Something you created could already have travelled farther than you know. We simply cannot turn that possibility into certainty. But you can stop living as though their response determines what the encounter would mean. Because once you no longer need them to confirm your value, something changes. If you ever did meet them, you could actually meet them, person to person, not fan to judge, not invisible person to important person, just two human beings occupying the same space, and suddenly, they found you means something else. The world now has access to a version of you that you used to keep hidden, maybe even from yourself. Your life is no longer a waiting room outside somebody else's world. And there's one card left. It doesn't answer whether they found you. It answers what you do now that you've stopped hiding. And this final card is the Two of Wands, which feels almost perfect here, because this card is not about waiting for the world to choose you. It's about realizing there is a larger world available to you and deciding whether you're actually willing to enter it. Look at the difference. At the beginning of this reading, so much of the energy was focused on being found. Did they see you? Did they notice you? Could your worlds somehow cross, but the Two of Wands turns you toward the horizon. Now you have to decide what you're going to do with your own visibility, because once you stop hiding, possibilities appear that didn't exist before. Not because the universe suddenly guarantees you access to famous people, because people can actually find you now. Your work exists. Your voice exists. Your face exists somewhere outside your private imagination. Your connections can expand. Something you create can travel. And maybe somebody notable has already encountered something connected to you. Maybe they haven't. We don't know. But you are no longer building your entire life around needing that answer. That's the shift. Wait, remember that post you almost deleted? That tiny moment from the beginning? Imagine 6 months from now discovering that somebody found your work because of the exact thing you nearly removed. Maybe it leads to a collaboration, an invitation, a new audience, a conversation you never expected. Not because the post was magically destined to do that. Because you left the door open, you allowed yourself to be discoverable. And that is very Two of Wands. You don't know exactly what is waiting outside the life you already understand. You just know you can't keep standing inside the same small circle, asking whether someone from another world might someday come rescue you from it. You have to build outward. And maybe that is why this celebrity kept appearing in your dreams. Maybe they were never only representing one person. Maybe they represented a level of life you had placed at a distance. Visibility, freedom, creative success, confidence. Access, the permission to take up more space. And slowly, the dream stopped asking you to admire that world from far away. They started asking whether you could imagine yourself existing inside a larger one. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed to meet this person. But if your paths ever do cross, I hope something will already be different. You won't need the encounter to prove you mattered. You'll already have a life of your own to bring into the room. So maybe the question was never only, have they found me? Maybe the better question now is, what could find you once you stop disappearing?